writer, is he? Row your boat!
She tells me to keep away. She is to marry Lord Wessex. What should I do?
If you love her, you must do as she asks.
I break her heart and mine?
It is only yours you can know.
She loves me, Thomas.
Does she say so?
No. And yet she does, where the ink has run with tears. Was she weeping when she gave you this?
Her letter came to me by the nurse.
Your aunt?
Yes, my aunt. But perhaps she wept a little. Tell me how you love her, Will.
Like a sickness, and its cure together.
Yes. Like rain and sun. Like cold and heat. Is your lady beautiful? Since I came here from the country, I've not seen her close. Tell me, is she beautiful?
Thomas, if I could write the beauty of her eyes, I was born to look in them and know myself.
And her lips?
Her lips? The early morning rose would wither on the branch if it could feel envy.
Hello again, welcome to Film Discussion, the show where we take a movie, we talk about the themes, the characters, everything that happened in it, the stuff we like about it, things we didn't like. Last week, in our last episode about Back to the Future, I said our next film was going to be Scorsese. I guess I lied, because that's not what we're doing this week. This week we're looking at a movie that I've only seen a handful of times. This is a classic with controversy behind its Oscar win. And if you haven't read the title, you know what this is. We're talking the 1998 classic movie that shows love at its purest form on screen, and that is Shakespeare in Love. What an interesting movie to talk about. I didn't expect I would get to this movie ever, really, because it was short on my list, and I was like, am I ever going to do this? Am I ever going to get to this one? It's an interesting movie that we can go into discussion and talk about because it's so unique in the way it presents Shakespeare. Because you look throughout history, he's been said as this great playwright. Everyone worships him. We study him in schools, in colleges, study his dialogue, his word, the Old English. And this movie, you see the way that the character of Shakespeare is portrayed as this man who doesn't write very well. He struggles. He doesn't understand what he's doing. He crumples up his paper all the time, not knowing what he's doing, but everyone still respects him and they think he's a good writer. And there's a lot of scenes in this movie where we see that turn on its head. And I think that's a really interesting approach to this, because if we just made Shakespeare out to be this good guy from the beginning, we'd all be super on board with everything that happens with him. So just going back a little bit, this movie is directed by John Madden. It won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. Everybody at that time said this should have gone to Saving Private Ryan. Should it have gone to Saving Private Ryan? I don't know. I'm not going to be upset if either of them won. I understand why this one won over Saving Private Ryan. I understand all of that. But Saving Private Ryan itself is still a really good movie. And then we got some more, of course, we got some more awards. Gwyneth Paltrow winning Best Actress. Super shocking. She well deserved it for this movie. No way in hell she shouldn't have won this. This was the only time in cinema history where I ever felt like Gwyneth Paltrow deserved to win something and deserve the recognition. I don't hate Gwyneth Paltrow. I think she's a good actress and she does steady work. But she hasn't had the gravitas or the emotional weight that she should have in a lot of the roles she does. But in this one, I really understood why she got the Academy Award, and I'm really proud of it that she did. So that's really nice to see. And of course, Best Supporting Actress goes to Dame Judi Dench for only having 6 minutes of screen time and only being in 4 scenes. That's one of the shortest in history. I know it's not the shortest. I can't think of what is right now. But it's incredible that the weight she pulled in this movie of just 6 minutes was enough to win her an Academy Award. So going back a little bit to the story of this is the story of a young Shakespeare. He's written a few plays. People respect him. They want to see his plays. But he's down on his luck. He can't write anymore. He's got writer's block. He's trying to figure out what he wants to write about. He gets hired by these guys to write a comedy, and he tells them it's Romeo and Ethel, the daughter of like the Pirate King or something, and he was going to write a comedy about this. And if you know right away, Romeo probably sounds familiar because if you haven't studied anything that anything that Shakespeare did in high school or in college, you know Romeo and Juliet. That's the name of the play that he's probably most famous for. I guess that's debatable. There's a lot of his that are really famous, but Romeo and Juliet, I think, is the most universally studied, and people can understand it more at a young age. So he's writing these plays, he's trying to figure out what he's trying to do, but he can't get it right. He doesn't have the inspiration, he doesn't have what he's looking for to write this play. And Joseph Fiennes, the actor that plays William Shakespeare in this movie, but as they just call him Will, it's so interesting, and he does a really good job of portraying this guy who's kind of ahead of himself. He knows he's smart, he has a bigger talk than he does, and it's really a great way to introduce Shakespeare as this guy who thinks he's a brilliant playwright, but he's not really. And I'm glad they went with that approach, like I said earlier, making Shakespeare look like he's smart, but he really isn't. And we see a few scenes of this where he's just talking to this guy at a bar. This is after, he signs on to do a play he hasn't wrote yet, and everyone's celebrating. So he's in this bar, and he's with a fellow writer whose name escapes me at the time, but whoever plays him, good job, man. And they're talking, and he's talking about his play, The Massacre of Paris. And you see Shakespeare like, that's a good title. That's really interesting. I should have thought of something like that. Then he asked Shakespeare, what's the title of your play? And he's like, Romeo and Ethel, the daughter of the pirate king. And he has no idea what this play's about. So, they're talking back and forth, and he gives him the ideas of Mercutio, gives him the idea of there's fighting and the star-crossed lovers, pretty much, of these people. And you think Shakespeare would have thought of that himself, but no, he gets a lot of inspiration from people he talks to. Plus, one of the great things about watching this is you see all the inspiration and everything that happens off stage that affects what's happening on stage. What I mean by that is, this movie does two things. You see the play of Romeo and Juliet being made, and you see them rehearsing and all of that. So we have a part of this movie that's a play in a movie. And the other part is the real world that we see in the movie of Shakespeare interacting with these characters. How he finds the character of Viola, how he finds his inspiration for all these other things we see in the real world, and it brings this different level to him as a writer. Because there's a famous thing, don't quote me on who said this, because I can't remember, but there's a famous saying with writers that is, write about what you know. Because that's how you can tell the best stories. As somebody who writes occasionally, I agree with this. It's not saying you can't write a great story of something you don't know. Obviously, Star Wars never happened, and that's one of the best written stories of all time. But it helps when you have influence from the real world. So the fighting between Romeo and Juliet's houses, Montague and the Capulets, is what's happening in the real world of Will Shakespeare going against these certain people. And the character of Wessex, played by Colin Firth, who does a brilliant job in this movie. Colin Firth, probably one of the most underrated actors of all time. His relationship with Will as competing for this girl's love, even though he is engaged to her, engaged to be married, pretty much. That's the idea of Prince in Romeo and Juliet. There's so much things that he takes from happening himself in the real world that he applies to the play Romeo and Juliet. So at the start, we're getting our actors together, trying to figure all this out. He's with his friend, played by Jeffrey Rush, who did really good in this. I've loved Jeffrey Rush. He's a really underrated actor, and what he does in this movie just brings a whole nother layer to him. He's got the craziest beard in this whole movie. I just love it. So when they're auditioning for this play that he hasn't even written the script yet, he just gives them a small piece of paper, and this is where we meet a lot of our side characters, not these big important people, but these side characters. And we got one man who's auditioning, but he has a stutter, and he can't really talk well, and they're going to give him a role, obviously, but they can't, give him this big, fledged-out thing, and yeah, it makes sense. Then we meet, after all these auditions, Shakespeare's just like, wow, I can't find anybody to play my Romeo, and then in comes the character of Thomas Kent. I love the name Thomas Kent because it's like the name of Superman and Batman's dads. I just think that's awesome, and that's just a comic book fan of me. So it's just, here comes this guy that Shakespeare can't see. And it's just intriguing, and he does really good. Thomas Kent, he feels like Thomas Kent should be Romeo, and he gets Thomas Kent to be Romeo. Very well done, very fun. And there's a chase scene because, as we find out, actually right at the beginning, because we're not dumb, and we have a scene earlier of Gwyneth Paltrow as Viola, we know who this person is. Viola is pretending to be Thomas Kent in order to be an actor, because she wants to be an actor. She sees all the plays when she's with the Queen, when she's with Wessex. She likes going to plays, and she's always wanted to be an actor. And during this time in the 1500s, there were not female actors as portrayed in this movie. We see even the characters of Juliet, even the character of the nurse, all these characters, they are not being played by women. They're being portrayed by men, whether it be, men with high-pitched voices, maybe who haven't hit puberty yet, these kind of things. And, going back a sec, that's another thing we see in the real world is the character of the nurse, because it's a kind of Viola's handmaiden kind of woman. And then we have a whole scene where, Shakespeare's climbing up to get into her room, and then the nurse sees him, and it's like, there's just all these things that he puts in Romeo and Juliet. Now, to be fair, whether or not these events actually happened, I don't know. I know this is not based off of a true story. I know there'd be so much more things different if it was based off a true story. I know that. So, the fact that we see all these things played out to look like he got the idea for Romeo and Juliet doing these things, yes, I understand that. Maybe those things didn't actually happen, but it's okay. So Thomas Kent, he auditions, and then we have the chase scene where Thomas Kent's trying to get back to his home. He says that he knows who Viola is and that kind of stuff. Will is chasing him down and this, and again, there's just so much happening in this movie involving the idea of Shakespeare finding out how he's going to write a play. And it's really well done. And something I don't think is hard to interpret about this movie is the main theme is love and finding who you love. And the way that they portray this, it's really force-fed to you. This is still a really well done movie. Everything about it is well done. But the idea of love is so apparent, it is so well seen in this movie that it kind of hits you over the head. What I mean by that is we have scenes with both Shakespeare and Viola, whose last name is, I don't know. I don't know Viola's last name, Gwyneth Paltrow's character. These two characters, we see them both having this intense moment where they're talking about what love means to them. And both of them show how much they want to find love. And it's so interesting because we learn later on that the character of Will is married. He's married and he's not with his wife anymore. But that's just another thing for this. So, the whole thing of love, yeah, it's the main theme. It's all this stuff happening in there. And you gotta wonder, would this be considered a star-crossed lover story of these two? Is his whole experience with Viola the whole thing that leads into Romeo and Juliet? And the way that this movie portrays it is, yes, it is. Again, do we know if that happened? I don't know. I doubt it. I'm sure he's a better playwright than people are giving him credit for in here. But it's just one of those things. So when he finally finds Thomas Kent, they catch up and all this stuff. We learn that he wants him to be Romeo. So now we got our Romeo, and we're going to start doing the play, Romeo and Ethel, the daughter of the Pirate King. But as we get later on invested in the story, and we get more things going in the movie, it slowly starts to become something not about Romeo and Ethel. It becomes Romeo and Juliet. Now, it doesn't happen right away. It goes through time to time, and we see the things that happen as it becomes Romeo and Juliet. Now, a character who we get introduced to not right away, but he's not a main character. There's a lot of side characters in this thing. That's the character of Ned Allen, played by, at the time, Gwyneth Paltrow's boyfriend, Ben Affleck. And Ben Affleck, perfect for this role because you can tell he plays this cocky guy he's an actor. He's cocky, he's overhypes himself all the time. And he asks Will, I want a part, give me the main part. And then Will brilliantly tells him, we'll give you the part of Mercutio. He's a brave fighter, warrior guy. And he's like, that's wonderful. What's the name of the play? Mercutio. And he's trying to boost up his ego so he'll do the role. And I think this is the part where we see, because he got Ned Allen, this really talented actor, this is where the Queen Baa speech comes in Romeo and Juliet. Again, Mercutio, not an idea Will came up with in this movie. He got it from his friend that he was talking to at the bar. You gotta question, can Will really write, or does he steal all his ideas? And it's a really interesting thing that we see. Does he steal all his ideas? I don't think he does. I think he needs the guidance from other people to tell him how to get to the story he wants to. Because at the end, he comes to the story on his own based on things that happened to him in real life. So now we're working on the play. We got some pretty intense scenes just going on where they're working on the play. He's speaking to Viola, who he knows is Thomas Kent now. And they're speaking to each other after they have sex, and that's how he's writing the dialogue. The way they communicate with each other is what he's using as dialogue for the characters. Because, again, you write it based off what you know. You know these things, and that's what you do. And this is where the love comes into play. And something I questioned from the beginning of the movie, and I still kind of found myself thinking later on as I watched this, is, does he really love Viola, or does he just love the idea of her so he can write this play? Because we see him struggling at first, and then we go back a little bit to the beginning. He's having this scene where, this is where the character of Rosaline comes into Romeo and Juliet. It's an ex-fling, as you will, that Romeo had previous. And the character of Rosaline is a girl that Shakespeare knows. But she's kind of promiscuous, to say the least, about her. So then we see he's going to write the story about Rosaline. He gets rid of Ethel, he's going to write it about Rosaline, and then he gets burned. He sees her with another man, and he starts to feel things that aren't good for him. He gets upset, he gets mad. So he lost his passion to write the story about Rosaline. So I think this is where I started to think, again, does he really care about Viola? Of course, at the end, he does. Like, how could he not? She means that much to him. But it is something you have to think about when you're watching this, is he fell in love too fast with Rosaline. He was still married, he fell in love too fast there. And then he meets Viola, he meets Thomas Kent, this person he's obviously attracted to. Does he really love them? Or does he just love the idea of being in love? It's an interesting thing to think about. Because you see him wanting to write the play. He said he's wanted to write the play a long time. But at the end, and this is where I think the point becomes mute, but it's at the end, he says, I don't want to write anymore. I'm all out of inspiration. And that's where I think he actually does fall in love with Viola. But you never know. He could have just been playing that up too. But it's an interesting thing to think about, as he really did love her. And at the end, I think we get that justification that he did love her. But it's just something I thought about throughout. Maybe you thought something different. It doesn't matter. So we've been rehearsing the play. And again, we go back to the character of Lord Wessex, played by Colin Firth. Again, really underrated actor. Really does a good job in this movie of portraying a character who, he's not wrong in what he's doing. He is, because this is the 1500s, he is allowed to buy a wife of Viola. He can do that. He's allowed to do that. He's not doing anything wrong in doing that, because that's what is allowed at the time. But because she is in love with Will, I think she's in love with Will for the reason she doesn't like Wessex. And that's because he gives her something fun and different to do. Gwyneth Paltrow really showed that well. And going to Gwyneth Paltrow as an actress in this movie, seeing her, she is playing Romeo. She also plays Juliet. She plays a man character, a female character, an empowering woman, and goes against the queen in some scenes. So if you ever think that she did not deserve to win the Oscar for this performance, you are mistaken. She did so much in this movie that just elevated her as an actress that she never really met after this. So Colin Firth, yeah, he's not wrong in what he did. He's just seen as the villain for the perspective because we're supposed to focus on William Shakespeare. We're supposed to focus on his love with Viola. And if we were focusing on Wessex the whole time, maybe Shakespeare looked like the bad guy. Maybe not. Maybe it's bad to buy women. Of course it's bad to buy women. But at the time, nobody was thinking that. So that's just the way of the times, that's how it goes. So there's, from the beginning scene when we have the opening kind of cue cards showing us the dialogue and the text, we see that there's a rivalry between two of the theaters that are in the same vicinity. And this is kind of an underlying thing because both of them, Shakespeare has promised he'd write a play for. Sells it to the one, they're going to do the Romeo and Ethel. Sells the other one, he'll write it for them, but he doesn't, he can't get around to it. I'm sorry I keep jumping around back and forth, there's just so much to talk about in this movie. And I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of it right away. And because women haven't worked in the theater up until this point, Viola being kind of like the first one to actually be an actress, you see a lot of these other characters that have to dress in women's clothing in order to do this kind of thing. There's one young guy, his name escapes me, he has to play Juliet later on, but he's playing the woman for the lead, of course, because as we get more and more invested with Viola and Shakespeare, the movie stops becoming about Romeo and Ethel, it's more about Romeo and Juliet, so these things are changing. The guy who owns the theater doesn't understand what's happening, and now this guy has to dress up like the character of Juliet, and then this other man has to become the nurse with him. And you have to imagine, a lot of plays involve love, and they involve comedy. And at the time, I'm sure men dressing up in women's clothing was funny. Nowadays, we wouldn't be laughing at that. That's a big difference in ethics here and now, but because of love and those kind of things that we had to see in plays, men had to dress in holy fuck, why can't I say women? Had to dress in women's clothing. Did they want to do it? I don't know. Some probably did, some probably didn't, but you're a working actor, you gotta make your money somehow, so you're gonna do these things to make money. And nobody wants to, really. At the time, they need money, so they'll do what it takes to make the money. They'll dress in women's clothing. Women's clothing, holy fuck. They'll dress in the clothing, that kind of stuff. That'll happen. So, let's talk quickly about Judi Dench. The character of Judi Dench. She is a remarkable actress. I love Judi Dench. She is just great in everything she does. She elevates it to a new level. Her role as the Queen, she is stunning. She is so great. She has a dominating presence that every time she's on screen, you just feel scared because she could hurt you just by staring at you. She's got that look about her, where she's got this face, she's got this feeling, and you're just terrified to be in her presence. I know I would be scared to be in her presence. That's just me. But the way she played the Queen, she has this intimidating factor. It was fierce, it was tough, but it was also really soft and delicate, and it was really beautiful to watch. The way she handles herself in front of everybody, and with Wessex, with Viola, with all these people, she really does that. And you can tell that Judi Dench should be a queen. That's how great she is. She's Dame Judi Dench, so that's pretty much it. But something I wasn't expecting when I first watched this movie, and when going back, I don't really remember, a lot of what I saw the first time, but my lord, the way she is dressed in her hair, she is made up like a doll, and it is just so bizarre. And the costume and production design, the sets are gorgeous, the costumes are gorgeous, it feels like the time, but it doesn't feel gringy and gritty and gross, it just feels clean, it feels precise, but there's that level of dirt to it too that doesn't make it feel like it's too glossy. I thought that was brilliant, it was really good, and Dame Judi Dench just knocking it out of the park. Just great as the Queen. So I guess I haven't really talked much about the character of Shakespeare, besides, the few things of him not really writing and that kind of stuff. The way Joseph Fiennes plays him, I'm really on board for. he has this way about him where you can tell he's respected, but he doesn't know why he's respected. I get that. And the way he falls in and out of love, again, I think he's lying. That's just me. He does a really good job of portraying that. Joseph Fiennes, this is the highlight of his career. If you don't think so, then you're mistaken. This is the highlight of the career of him and Gwyneth Paltrow. They will never do anything as good as they did here. I think he's got like that new Michael Jackson thing coming out. Looks stupid and terrible. Just an abysmal thing for him to do. But we're not talking about Michael Jackson. We're talking about Joseph Fiennes. Let's talk a little bit about the play Romeo and Juliet itself. I've read the play. I've studied the play. Did I like studying the play? Hell no. It's not my favorite. Hamlet is my favorite Shakespeare play. That's probably an obvious answer. You know, everyone likes those ones, Macbeth, Hamlet, those kind of things. But why I like Hamlet the best is why I hate Romeo and Juliet, and that is how dumb Romeo is. Hamlet is smart, he's prestigious, and he thinks about what he's going to do. We have a whole scene where he's contemplating doing what he did and doing what he might do. Romeo just is a dumbass whose events just lead him to do something stupid. Can that be the same as for Shakespeare? Did he do anything stupid that led him to the events where his lover has to be taken away? Sure, of course he did. She was engaged. She is engaged to Wessex, and they are going to sail to America. So it's going to end in tragedy no matter what happens with him. But Romeo and Juliet, going back to the play, the star-crossed lovers angle, yeah, it's cool, it's cute, it's adorable, but it's a tragedy. And you have to imagine, we've been immune to this for a long time, because this play's been around for hundreds of years. But imagine being their opening night and seeing this play unfold for the first time. And you're used to laughing, you're used to seeing these happy things and falling in love, and you see these two lead characters. They die. They don't end up together. They die. Because their love for each other is so strong they can't live in the world without them. And at the same time, you have to imagine, who wants to watch that play? That is depressing as shit. It's dark. It's moody. There's so much ominous tone to it. Who would want to really sit down and watch that for fun? Who knows? Of course, there's people who would want to, but that's why at the end I think that's why the Queen tells him next time write a comedy. Maybe the idea of Romeo and Juliet was too far for people in this time. Who knows? Still a great play. Hamlet's better though. So when we finally get to the scene where Viola is outed as being Thomas Kent, the play is going to be shut down and they won't be able to do it. So what happens is a really, really great scene, I think, for anybody who's in theater. And that is, the other theater trope that was kind of going against them, working against them, said they can use their theater as the space to play Romeo and Juliet. But the only problem is they don't have a Romeo anymore because Thomas Kent can't portray the character because he's a woman. And why I think this is good for anybody who's in theater is because it shows how the community will help each other and do things like this. They have feuds. They want to outbeat each other with a better play, a more emotional play, a more funny play. But when it comes down to it, they are going to help each other in times of need. Like a family, like a community of people who care for each other and are going to risk their own sanctity and their own helpfulness in order to help these other people. It was a beautiful scene. It was one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And so then we're about to portray Romeo and Juliet on play. We don't have a Romeo. Who has to step up and play it? Joseph Fiennes as Shakespeare. And I've seen a lot of portrayals of Romeo and Juliet on screen. I've seen the one from the 60s. I've seen the one of DiCaprio. I've seen a lot in different ones. Why this one is my favorite. And we don't even see the whole play, just the snippets that we do see of the play. Why it's my favorite is the same reason I like Joseph Fiennes and Gwyneth Paltrow in this role. They are playing two different levels of these characters. At the same time, they are playing Romeo and Juliet, but they're playing other people at the same time. This is a play. Every time we've seen Romeo and Juliet outside of this, we're seeing it from that world, in Fair Verona and all that. We're seeing them as real people, but in this we're seeing them as play actors. They're not real. It adds another layer to it. We're seeing it as a play. We are not seeing it as a movie or unfolded on stage. They are actors in a play. It's gorgeous. It's so smart. It is so interesting to see that concept brought to that. So here's Shakespeare. He has to play as Romeo. And what happens right before our play is about to start, our actor who is playing Juliet can't hit the high pitches anymore because his voice finally grew. It got masculine. It got strong. Everything's going wrong. We don't have a Juliet now. At the same time, Viola is about to be, well, she is married now. She's about to go off to America with Wessex, Colin Firth, but she sneaks out because she needs to see the play that she helped with, she was part of, because of her love for Shakespeare. So I guess there's another character who I haven't talked about before, and that is, I can't remember the guy's name, but he owned the other play stage, and he's a really nice character because you can see he's not an actor. Shakespeare gives him the role of the apothecary, and he's trying so hard to learn his lines, and he's doing his best to learn them, and he gets it at the end. But it's really nice to see him struggle with that, because you can tell he's not an actor. He likes theater, of course he does. Why else would he have a stage? But he's just trying to figure out, he's trying to learn for himself all these different things and tropes and that kind of stuff. It's beautiful, it's really cool. So now we have Viola, she's running off, she's coming to see the play. But we don't have a Juliet, so who has to step in order to make the play work? That is Viola. She has to play Juliet. And at this time, Shakespeare and Viola, they know their love isn't allowed. They still love each other. They tried to grow apart. They tried to leave, but their love is so strong that even on stage, you can feel the two love each other, and there's so much chemistry there. And the scene, one of the most beautiful scenes in film history, is when Gwyneth Paltrow walks onto that stage the first time as Juliet, and the audience is silent. The actors go silent, because you know this is the first time they've seen a woman on stage. And start to think, do they know this is a woman? Because they're not used to it. Is this man just so attractive and good? But part of me knows that all of them do know that's a woman. Like, how could you not know? That is a woman. Now we're doing Romeo and Juliet, the play. We're seeing Mercutio with Ben Affleck. We're seeing the stage owner as the apothecary. We're seeing, in one of the most beautiful scenes, the guy who stutters, who couldn't talk. He was struggling with his lines. He's playing the narrator, and it is beautiful. He gets his lines right, and you can tell he did really well. And the play goes well. And you can see in that theater, the audience is in shock of what they are seeing, what they are learning, and what they are hearing about. It is beautiful. It is moving, and it just grasps you because of how beautiful it is. And we get to the final scene of the play and one of the final scenes of the movie, where Romeo and Juliet, they're on their deathbeds. And it's one of the most well-portrayed times we've seen these characters do this. Because you've seen the movies about these characters, but you've seen it on stage with the audience watching it too, and how this is their first time watching this. Because nowadays, we've been immune to this. We've seen tragedies like this. Romeo and Juliet is such a tragedy. And when it ends, it's so beautiful. And we see everybody so happy. And then who comes in but Wessex, and he's just pissed, and the Queen is there too. Who thought the Queen was there? That was so weird. The Queen was watching this play. She loves theater, and she knows who that is, who the girl is, and she calls her Thomas Kent. She calls Viola Thomas Kent, so nobody is suspicious of it. And now we get one of our final scenes in the movie. The love that these two characters had for each other, Shakespeare and Viola, they have to say goodbye. Just like the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet in the real world, Shakespeare lost his girl. And they're leaving again. She's leaving. He doesn't want to write anymore. The girl he loves is going to America with another man. He doesn't want to write. He lost his inspiration. But she tells him to write about her and to keep writing about her. And that's where Shakespeare gets his inspiration for Twelfth Night. I love this movie. If you are a fan of Shakespeare, you should see this movie just to see the character and how he might have acted, who he could have been like. But also, if you are a fan of young love and people who are star-crossed lovers, who you just want to see people who love each other come together in times of need, this is a movie you should watch. Because Shakespeare is in love in this movie. And again, like I questioned earlier, was he really in love? Who knows? Maybe that's the tragedy of it all. Now that she's gone, he can't write truly because his new inspiration is gone. That's going to do it for this installment of Film Discussion. If you have a movie you want me to talk about, please let me know. I'm always taking suggestions. Are we ever going to get to a Scorsese film? Probably. Who knows when. We'll get there sometime. If you love love, you'll love Shakespeare and love. I'll say love a few more times because that's how much I love saying love. This movie is about love, love, love. Good love and good luck.